My leg ached after the fall, and I asked my daughter-in-law to help me to the bathroom. She turned away coldly. "You have 2 hands. Do it yourself, you useless old hag." My son stood beside me saying nothing. His silence was deafening. In that moment, I made a decision. Not out of anger, but out of clear thinking. I wouldn't sue them with lawyers and paperwork. Instead, I would give them 7 days to show me their true colors, 7 days to expose the truth behind their smiles. I would watch, I would listen, and things would change. Thank you for being here and listening from the beginning. Before the story continues, feel free to leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from your city or country. Those small messages help build a stronger sense of connection within this community. Note: this story includes some fictional elements for storytelling and educational purposes. Any similarities to real names or situations are purely coincidental. I was 72 years old and still believed I had the strength of a younger woman. The morning sun filtered through my bedroom window, casting golden light across the hardwood floor. It was Friday, my day. Every Friday for the past decade, I'd walked along the Willamette River, letting the crisp Portland air wash away the weight of the week. I'd chosen my white dress carefully that morning. It was simple, elegant, the kind of dress that made me feel like Eleanor Mitchell again. Not just someone's mother, not just someone's mother-in-law, but a woman with her own life, her own dreams. I'd bought it years ago before David married Catherine, before everything became complicated. My house sat on a quiet street overlooking the river. I'd built it brick by brick, dollar by dollar, over 40 years working as a labor and delivery nurse. I'd delivered thousands of babies, held the hands of frightened mothers, witnessed the miracle of life countless times. Every corner of this house held a piece of those sacrifices. Every room was a monument to a life spent giving. The wooden staircase in the center of my home was particularly beautiful, old oak sturdy, the kind of craftsmanship you don't see anymore. I'd stood at the bottom of those stairs so many times, looking up at them with pride. I'd paid for every nail, every board, every step. 40 years of 12-hour shifts had bought those stairs. That Friday morning, I descended them like I had 1,000 times before. I wasn't hurrying. I wasn't careless. It was simply one of those moments where fate decides your life will change. My left foot caught on something, or perhaps I simply lost my balance. There was no drama, no moment of panic where I could brace myself, just a slip. The world tilted sideways in an instant. I remember the feeling more than I remember falling. The cold smoothness of the oak against my skin, 1 step, then 2. The sickening sensation of my body no longer obeying my commands. By the 8th step, I had stopped moving, but the pain had only just begun. My left leg wouldn't respond. I tried to move it, concentrating as hard as I'd ever concentrated on anything, but there was nothing. Just numbness spreading like ice water through my veins, thick and suffocating. My ribs screamed with every shallow breath. I lay there on those stairs, the same stairs I had paid for, piece by piece, dream by dream, and realized I was completely alone in the house. I managed to reach my phone with trembling hands. 911. I've had a fall. I can't move my leg. Please send someone. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They were young, efficient kind. They spoke in gentle voices, moving with practiced precision as they placed me on a stretcher. "You're doing great, ma'am. We're taking you to Providence Hospital. You're going to be okay." But would I? The emergency room was a blur of lights and voices. Doctors examined me, asking questions I could barely focus on. I'd spent my entire career in hospitals delivering life. Now I was the patient, vulnerable and afraid. Dr. Young finally sat beside my bed. She was about 40 with dark eyes that had seen too much suffering. She spoke with the gentle precision of someone who had delivered bad news many times before. "Eleanor, you have severe nerve damage in your left leg," she said. "There are no fractures, which is fortunate. However, the trauma to your nervous system means you could experience temporary paralysis. It could last anywhere from a few weeks to several months. Your body needs complete rest and proper care." I listened carefully the way I'd been trained. Every word mattered. Every possibility had to be considered. I was a nurse. I understood the language of injury and recovery. Your family will need to help you during recovery," Dr. Young continued. "You'll need someone with you around the clock, someone you can trust." I nodded, though something twisted deep inside my chest. My son would have to tell Catherine. My daughter-in-law would have to adjust her life for me. The thought of being a burden, of needing help, of losing my independence, it terrified me more than any physical pain ever could. As I lay in that hospital bed looking out the window at the Portland skyline, I didn't know that my real test was just beginning. I didn't know that the next 7 days would reveal truths I could never unknow. The drive home from Providence Hospital was quiet. Too quiet. David kept his hands on the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension. In the passenger seat beside him, Catherine held her phone like a lifeline, her fingers moving across the screen with practiced precision. She didn't look at me in the back seat. She hadn't looked at me since the paramedics brought me to the ambulance. I watched the familiar streets of Portland pass by through the window. The river glinted in the afternoon sun. Somewhere out there, people were living their Friday afternoon freely walking, laughing, making plans for the weekend. I tried not to think about my walk that would never happen. "So," Catherine's voice cut through the silence. She didn't turn around. "How long did the doctor say you'll be like this?" David shifted uncomfortably. "A few weeks, maybe a few months. She has severe nerve damage." Catherine looked back at her phone. I saw her lips move slightly as if she were calculating something in her head. Then came the sigh. It was long, deliberate, loaded with something I recognized immediately. It wasn't concern. It wasn't the kind of sigh a person makes when they're worried about someone they love. This was different. "A few weeks," she said, speaking each word slowly as if tasting them. "Or a few months." That sigh. In that single exhale, I heard everything she wasn't saying. I heard the weight of an inconvenience. I heard the sound of plans being rearranged, freedoms being compromised. I heard mathematics, cold, careful calculation. How many hours, how many meals, how many interruptions to her life. 40 years. I had spent 40 years as a nurse listening to people. I had learned to hear what lived beneath words. I had learned to read the silence between sentences. And Catherine's sigh told me everything I needed to know. When we arrived at the house, David carefully helped me inside. The living room had been prepared, a hospital bed set up in the corner as far from the windows as possible. The space was dim even in the afternoon. It was where they'd decided I should be, not in the sunlight. Not where I could see the river or the street or anything that might remind me I once had a life outside these four walls. I looked around at my home. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every book on those shelves, I had paid for them. I had worked double shifts, missed holidays, sacrificed my youth to build this life. My hands had helped bring thousands of babies into the world, and those same hands had saved this money, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. This house was my life made solid. And now I was being stored in its darkest corner. "I'll just get you settled," David said gently, helping me onto the bed. His voice was apologetic, as if he were sorry for existing, for having a wife for the situation that suddenly demanded his attention. Catherine appeared in the doorway, still holding her phone. "I'll order something for dinner," she said. It was the first thing she'd said directly to me since we left the hospital. "You need anything?" It was a courtesy. Just a courtesy offered with the same tone one might use to ask a guest if they needed more ice in their drink. "No," I said quietly. "Thank you." She nodded and left, already dialing someone on her phone. David squeezed my hand briefly, then followed her out of the room. I lay alone in that corner, listening to the sounds of their life continuing in the other rooms. The television, laughter, the clink of glasses, the world moving on without me. In Catherine's sigh, I had heard a calculation. Not concern, not love, just numbers. Just the weight of a problem that needed to be managed, contained, solved. I didn't know it yet, but I was beginning to understand something vital. I was beginning to see them, truly see them for the first time. That night, I lay awake in the darkness of the corner room. The house was silent except for the distant sound of the Willamette River, that constant, reliable current that had been my companion for so many years. I could hear it even from inside if I listened carefully. The sound of water moving forward, indifferent to what tried to stop it. I wasn't thinking about the pain in my ribs or the numbness in my leg. I was thinking about 40 years. 40 years of 12-hour shifts. 40 years of standing in delivery rooms, holding the hands of frightened women, welcoming new life into the world. 40 years of sacrifice, of missed holidays, of birthdays spent in a hospital, of putting my own life on hold so I could save others. And I was thinking about my son. I had raised David alone after his father died. I'd worked double shifts, missed his school plays, skipped meals so we could have more. I had built this house brick by brick, dollar by dollar, all with the hope that one day he would have security, that one day he would understand what his mother had done for him. But David chose Catherine, and Catherine had sighed. In that sigh was something I recognized. I'd spent my entire career reading people. I'd learned to see past words, past polite masks, past the things people say when they think someone is listening. I knew what that sigh meant. It meant burden. It meant inconvenience. It meant a calculation of time and effort and cost. I was no longer their family. I was a problem to be managed. That realization should have broken me. By all rights, lying in that dark corner, injured and helpless, I should have wept. I should have felt despair. But instead, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. I sat up slowly in the bed, testing my leg. It moved. It hurt. Yes, the nerve damage was real, but it responded to my commands. I had spent my entire career understanding the human body. I knew what paralysis looked like. I knew what recovery felt like. And this was not permanent. This was injury, not incapacity. They thought I was broken. They thought I was helpless. They thought I would need them to take care of me, and that thought terrified them. But what if I could choose to be broken? What if I could give them exactly what they thought I was and watch what they did with that power? I made my decision that night, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in a cold, clear pursuit of truth. I would pretend. For 1 week, I would lie in this bed and pretend to be paralyzed. I would watch my son and his wife. I would let them believe I was helpless. And in that week, they would show me exactly who they really were. They would reveal their true selves, unguarded and honest. Because that's what people do when they think no one is watching. They become themselves. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes. In the darkness, I could still hear the river. I had spent my life giving. Now it was time to take back my life, starting with the truth. I fell asleep with a clear plan and a clearer purpose. I woke before dawn that Saturday morning, my body still heavy with fatigue from the hospital, from the fall, from the weight of everything I was carrying. But my mind was sharp, focused. I had spent the night practicing what I would do, mentally rehearsing my performance. If I was going to do this, I had to commit to it completely. They couldn't see even a hint of deception. I lay still for several minutes, testing what my body could and couldn't do. The nerve damage was real, the numbness in my left leg, the ache in my ribs. But I knew the difference between injury and incapacity. I knew my body. After 40 years as a nurse, I understood the language of pain and recovery better than most doctors. This morning, though, I would be someone who couldn't move on her own. Someone who needed help, someone who was entirely dependent. My left leg remained still. I let my hands tremble slightly as I reached for the phone on my nightstand. The trembling wasn't entirely an act from the fall, from the stress. My hands were actually shaking. But I exaggerated it slightly, letting the weakness show in every movement. "Kate," I called out, keeping my voice soft, apologetic, small. "Honey, could you help me get to the bathroom?" It took a moment. Then I heard footsteps. Catherine appeared in the doorway, and the first thing I noticed was that she was already dressed for exercise yoga pants, a fitted top that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She was holding her phone in one hand, her attention already halfway somewhere else. She looked at me in the bed, then back at her phone. "I'm heading to Pilates," she said, not bothering with hello or good morning. "You have 2 hands. Figure it out." I felt something settle inside me. Not anger exactly, but a kind of confirmation. Here it was. Here was the real Catherine, the one who lived beneath the polite smile and the pretense. The one who emerged the moment she thought I was helpless. "My leg is paralyzed, Catherine," I said quietly, keeping my voice steady. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold the phone. I need help. She sighed, not the calculating sigh from the car, but something sharper, something that contained actual irritation, as if I were an inconvenience she hadn't budgeted for. I'm not a nurse, Eleanor, she said flatly. I have my own life. Then she turned and walked away, her phone already back up to her ear. I heard her voice drift down the hallway, already engaged in some other conversation, already moving on to more important things. I listened to her footsteps descend the stairs. I heard the front door open and close, the car keys, the engine starting, and then the sound of tires on pavement moving away from the house, leaving me behind. That was the first test, and she had failed immediately. I lay in the bed, unmoving, staring at the ceiling of the corner room. The morning light was just beginning to filter in through the small window, but it barely reached where I was. I was alone in the house, completely alone. I could have gotten up. My body was capable of moving, of functioning, but I didn't. Instead, I lay there and let the weight of the moment settle over me. Catherine had shown me exactly who she was in that single moment. She had shown me her answer to my unspoken question, "Do you care about me?" The answer had been a sigh and the sound of an accelerating car. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence of the empty house. Somewhere in the distance, I could barely hear the river, but mostly there was just quiet. Just me. Just the truth I had suspected all along, now confirmed. The test had begun. I lay still all morning after Catherine left. The sound of her car disappearing down the street was like a door slamming shut, not on her life, but on any hope I had been harboring that this morning would be different, that she might surprise me, that beneath the sigh and the coldness, there might be some small seed of kindness. There wasn't. The corner room was quiet, too quiet. It was just me and the weight of everything I couldn't do. I couldn't reach the bathroom on my own. I couldn't wash my face without help. I couldn't even pour myself a glass of water without someone to assist me. And no one was coming to help me. No one was going to come through that door and ask if I needed anything. No one was thinking about me at all. As the hours passed in that corner, I found myself asking questions that cut deeper than any physical pain. Was this really who they were, both of them? Was this the life I had built toward my son, whom I had raised alone after his father died? Had he truly become this kind of man? A man who would leave his elderly mother alone in a darkened room while he went about his day without a second thought? Or had he always been this way and I simply hadn't wanted to see it? I thought about the years, all those years of double shifts, all those years of missed celebrations, of choosing between paying rent and buying his school supplies, of building this house brick by brick with hands that never seemed to stop working. I had done it all for him, for security, for a future, for the hope that one day he would understand what his mother had sacrificed. But understanding requires paying attention. And David, it seemed, had never learned how to pay attention to anything except Catherine's needs. Around noon, I managed to reach the pitcher of water that someone, probably David, in a moment of guilt-motivated consideration, had left within arm's reach of my bed. I pulled myself up slightly, my ribs protesting with sharp pain that made me catch my breath. My hands were still trembling, though by now some of that trembling was real, born from the discomfort and frustration of the morning. I took a few sips of the lukewarm water. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was something I had managed on my own, at least. One small act of independence in a day, otherwise defined by helplessness. I lay back down and continued my vigil. From somewhere deeper in the house, I could hear the television playing. Catherine's voice, then David's short responses, brief acknowledgments. I knew that dynamic well enough now. I had studied it in the car in the way she commanded, and he obeyed without question. She spoke and he listened. She wanted something, and he provided it. She made a decision, and he accepted it. There was no conversation between them. There was only her will and his compliance. Eventually, I heard David moving with purpose, gathering his keys, making an excuse. "I have to go into the office." I heard him tell Catherine, his voice carrying down the hallway. "There's a problem with the Henderson account. Work." It was always work with David. Even as a teenager, he had found reasons to stay late at school, to come home just before dinner, to disappear into his room. I had thought he was growing up, becoming responsible and dedicated. Now I wondered if he was simply running away from Catherine, from me, from the complicated reality of a life that required him to make difficult choices. The front door closed. The car started. He was gone. Time moved differently when you were completely alone. It didn't pass the way time was supposed to pass. It didn't flow like the river outside moving toward some destination. Instead, it pooled around you thick and heavy each minute, stretching into something almost unbearable. Every hour felt like a day. Every day felt like a year. I lay in my corner and listened to Catherine living her life through the walls of the house I had built. She opened the refrigerator with casual ownership, closed a door without concern for who might be sleeping, turned up the volume on the television as if the only ears that mattered were her own. She was going about her day completely unbothered, completely indifferent to the fact that I was lying helpless just a few rooms away. I could hear her footsteps. I could hear her humming, actually humming, as if this were the most normal day in the world, as if I weren't here, as if I didn't exist at all. Now I only knew how to wait. I waited for David to come home. I waited to see if he would come to check on me, if guilt or love or any sense of obligation would bring him to my corner room. I waited to see if anyone would remember that I existed, that I was his mother, that somewhere in the years of sacrifice and work and building a life, I had earned the right to be treated with something more than indifference. The afternoon light began to shift through the small window. The shadows in the corner room grew longer, darker, and I waited. I lay still all morning, chained to that corner bed by the weight of understanding. Around noon, I heard the front door open. Unusual. David never came home before 6. His footsteps crossed the hallway with hesitation, the gait of a man carrying guilt he couldn't quite name. There was something defeated in the way he moved, as if the weight of his own choices had already begun to physically bend him. He appeared in the doorway to the living room, his face etched with something that looked like remorse. But I'd spent 40 years learning to read bodies, to distinguish between genuine emotion and the performance people offer when they've been caught. I'd learned to read the difference between authentic regret and performative concern. "Mom, I'm so sorry about Catherine's attitude this morning," he said, pulling a chair close to my bed. His voice carried the rehearsed quality of an apology he'd been practicing. "She's just stressed about money, about the future." She didn't mean to be harsh. I opened my eyes, slowly studying my son's face with the precision of a diagnostician. He was 48 years old, and he still couldn't meet my gaze directly. His eyes darted away, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "Do you remember when you were 8? I asked quietly. "When you broke Mrs. Peterson's vase, the one with the blue flowers?" His jaw tightened. The memory was still tender, even after 40 years. "Mom, that was... you lied about it." I continued, my voice steady and clinical. "For 3 days you maintained that lie. You told me the neighborhood kids had done it. You told me you'd tried to stop them. You constructed an elaborate fiction to protect yourself from accountability." David's hands were trembling. I could see the sweat beginning to form on his upper lip. "Until I found the pieces in the garage," I said, "hidden beneath a tarp, wrapped in newspaper dated the day you broke it. You remember what I told you then? You said a mother can always tell when her son is hiding something from her." He whispered. "A mother can see through excuses," I said. "She can read the gap between what her son says and what he actually believes in his heart. The gap between the lie and the truth becomes a chasm you can't hide. I see that chasm now, David. It's enormous." He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, away from me, away from the truth, away from the accusation in my eyes. His shoulders were hunched, his entire body language broadcasting his desire to disappear. But he couldn't disappear. Not while I was still here. Not while I was still watching. "David, I need you to help me to the bathroom." I said, my voice softer now, not kinder, just strategic. "I need to wash my face. I need clean clothes." He hesitated for just a moment, that crucial pause where he was clearly weighing whether he had the energy to help his mother. Then something shifted in his expression. Perhaps it was shame. Perhaps it was the memory of who he used to be before Catherine reshaped him into someone smaller. He came back and his hands, gentle, familiar, helped me to my feet. He supported my weight as I made my way slowly to the washroom, moving with exaggerated care as if I were made of glass. He waited outside the door while I cleaned myself as best I could with my limited mobility, and I heard him pacing back and forth, the sound of a man at war with himself. He brought me fresh clothes without being asked. A soft cardigan I loved, pants with an elastic waist. He'd chosen them with care. When I emerged from the washroom, he was sitting on the edge of my bed, his face buried in his hands. "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I love you." I sat down beside him, not to comfort him, but to look at him directly, to make sure he understood that I saw him not the version Catherine had demanded he become, but the real version underneath. "Love isn't something you demonstrate when it's convenient," I said. "Love is a choice you make when it costs you something. Love is standing up for someone, even when it means standing against the person you share your bed with. Love is choosing conscience over comfort." He didn't respond. He just sat there, a grown man trapped between two women, unable to choose between the comfort of obedience and the courage of defiance. "I know you love me," I said finally, "but love without courage is just sentiment, and sentiment doesn't protect anyone. It doesn't save anyone. Sentiment is what people offer when they've already decided not to act." That night, after David had returned to work and Catherine had disappeared into their bedroom, I lay in the darkness and listened to them through the thin walls. I heard Catherine's voice tight with frustration. "Why did you come home? Why are you making this harder? Why are you going soft on her?" And David's response, barely audible, I don't know anymore." He was breaking. I could hear it in those 5 words, but not fast enough, not in a way that would change anything. I had 4 more days to wait. Wednesday night came, and I stopped pretending to sleep. I lay in that corner room, ears sharp as a predator's, waiting, listening. Catherine had grown careless, or perhaps she'd never truly believed I was listening to begin with. She was on the phone in David's study voice, loud enough that her words found their way through the thin walls like poison seeping into water. "Meredith, I'm telling you we're looking at facilities now, the cheapest ones. There are a few that take Medicare, so the costs would be manageable." A pause, a laugh that made my skin crawl. "She'll adjust fine. People her age always do. They get used to it quickly. Once she's in there, she won't even remember what her own house looked like." The casual cruelty of those words, the absolute certainty that my life, the one I'd built brick by brick through 40 years of dedication in hospital corridors, could be erased as easily as wiping a slate clean. But Thursday brought the full picture, the moment I truly understood the depth of their betrayal. I heard David come home early. His footsteps were deliberate, purposeful. He moved through the house and into the kitchen where Catherine was waiting. I pressed myself against the mattress, every muscle tense, every nerve focused. "Once she's in there," Catherine said, her voice low but not low enough, "this house is ours. We can finally sell it." My stomach turned to ice. "Eleanor paid good money for this place, sure, but legally..." Catherine's voice took on a calculating edge I'd never heard before. "We can figure something out. Power of attorney, medical conservatorship. My brother's a lawyer. He owes me a favor." David's response came so quietly I almost missed it. "I don't know, Kate. You don't know." Catherine's voice sharpened. "David, we've been drowning in debt for 5 years. This house is worth over $1 million. Your mother doesn't have anyone else. No other children. No grandchildren who'll contest it." Another pause, longer this time, heavy with consequence. "Okay," David finally said. His voice was barely a whisper, as if by speaking quietly enough he could minimize the magnitude of what he was agreeing to. "Okay, do what you need to do." Those words, 6 small words that betrayed everything I'd taught him, everything I'd sacrificed for everything I'd believed about the bond between a mother and her son. I lay still for a long time after they finished talking, not shocked anymore. Shock requires surprise, and I'd already seen the outline of this betrayal. What I felt now was something far sharper, far colder, a crystal clear understanding of exactly who my son had chosen to stand beside and at what price. They didn't just want to put me away in some cheap facility where I'd fade into anonymity. They wanted to erase me entirely, to take the home I'd paid for with decades of exhaustion and dedication, the life I'd built room by room, the legacy I'd tried to leave, and convert it all into their bank account. It was so much worse than I'd imagined, and it was so much more reason to do exactly what I'd planned. I reached for my phone in the darkness. I opened the ride-sharing app one more time, confirming my reservation. 7 days from now, 7:00 a.m. on Friday, the taxi would come, and Eleanor Mitchell would stop being invisible. Everything was in motion now, and there was no turning back. Midnight came and sleep wouldn't find me. I lay there in the darkness of that corner room, Catherine's words still echoing in my ears like a verdict I couldn't escape. We need to think about facilities, the costs. 20 years of our lives. 20 years. As if my life, the life I'd built, the home I'd earned brick by brick, was nothing more than a debt they were calculating on the back of an envelope. As if I was an equation to be solved, not a mother to be loved. The anger came first. Hot. Raw. But then something else replaced it. Clarity so sharp it felt like ice water in my veins. I couldn't lie still anymore. Not after everything I'd heard. Not after understanding exactly who my son had chosen to stand beside. My hands moved before my mind could stop them. The phone on the nightstand, my phone paid for with my money from the career I'd sacrificed so much for, glowed in the darkness like a small rebellion. I opened the ride-sharing app with fingers that didn't tremble, not because I wasn't afraid, but because fear and clarity had become the same thing. They were two sides of the same coin, and I'd stopped trying to separate them. I entered the address, my home. The pickup location was already saved in the system, waiting like a memory. Destination. I typed in the name of a small resort near the coast about 2 hours away. Oceanside Retreat. Somewhere Catherine and David would never think to look. Somewhere I could sit on a porch and listen to the waves instead of to their lies. Somewhere I could remember who Eleanor Mitchell was before she became just mother and problem. Then I scrolled to the scheduling option. 7 days from now, 7:00 a.m. on Friday morning. I stared at that date for a long time. 1 week. That's all I needed. 7 days to watch them unfold like a book I was finally reading without flinching. 7 days to see what they'd do when they thought I was helpless. 7 days to strip away the pretense and see them for who they truly were beneath the apologies and the excuses. 7 days to confirm what my 40 years as a nurse had already taught me about human nature, that people show you exactly who they are when they think no one is watching. My thumbs moved across the screen, and I typed the driver's notes with the precision of someone who'd spent 4 decades writing patient charts, documenting lives bearing witness. Pick up at 7 a.m. sharp Friday morning. Passenger will be waiting at the curb with 1 small bag. Please be on time. This departure is time-sensitive and non-negotiable. Passenger needs to leave immediately upon arrival. This is a firm appointment. Passenger is reclaiming her independence. Thank you for your reliability and discretion. I read it 3 times. Each time I heard something different. A command, a prayer, a declaration of war against invisibility. I confirmed the booking. The app asked for payment. I used my credit card, the one Catherine didn't know about, the one I'd kept separate for emergencies all these years. The one that proved even after 72 years of being a mother, a nurse, a wife, a provider, I still had choices. The charge went through $52.75 for the deposit. $52.75 for my freedom. It was the best investment I'd ever made. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. The plaster was water-stained from an old leak years ago. I'd fixed it myself that summer, climbed that very ladder I would later fall from. I'd fixed so many things in this house over the decades. Built it, maintained it, paid for it, loved it. 1 week. That's all I needed to prove something they'd forgotten. I wasn't waiting for rescue. I was orchestrating my own exit. I wasn't a problem to be solved or managed. I was a woman with a plan, a phone, and 7 days to show them exactly what happens when you underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose but everything left to reclaim. The taxi would come at 7 a.m. on Friday, and I would be ready. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. In the darkness, with the sound of the Willamette River in the distance, I smiled. Everything was in motion now, and there was no turning back. I lay still and watched. That's what I did. Now I watched. Not with my eyes open, not obviously, but with every nerve in my body attuned to the smallest movement, the quietest sound, the subtlest shift in tone. I'd spent 40 years as a nurse learning to observe patients, to read the signs their bodies gave away before their words ever could. Now I was observing my own family, and what I saw made my skin crawl in ways I hadn't anticipated. The betrayal came in small doses, which somehow made it worse. Sunday came gray and cold, the kind of Portland morning where the sky matched the water and everything felt heavy with moisture and secrets. I was propped up in that corner bed, the one pushed so far from the window that I might as well have been in a basement, banished to the margins of my own home. Catherine moved through the house like she owned it, which I suppose in her mind she already did. She glided past me without so much as a glance, her phone pressed to her ear, her expensive athleisure outfit making soft swishing sounds as she walked. The sound of money I'd never asked her to spend. She didn't think I was watching. That was the gift of being invisible. Her eyes landed on the small table beside my bed. The table where I'd carefully placed my jewelry that first morning home from the hospital, my mother's pearl necklace, handed down through 3 generations of women. The diamond ring my late husband had given me 50 years ago. The night he proposed under the stars at Cannon Beach. The delicate gold bracelet my best friend had gifted me for our wedding, engraved on the back with both our initials. Things that held weight, not just in monetary value, but in time, in memory, in the continuity of a life lived. Catherine's fingers reached out. She picked up the necklace first, held it to the light filtering through the window I couldn't see from my bed, examined it, like she was assessing livestock at an auction, like it was inventory. She won't even know, she said into the phone. To David, I assumed. She's confused now. The doctor said it could last weeks, maybe months. She won't miss a thing. Her voice wasn't angry or desperate. It wasn't even ashamed. It was practical, clinical. The way you'd discuss what to do with old furniture you no longer needed. The way you'd talk about discarding something broken. She slipped the necklace into her pocket, then the bracelet. She left the ring, too obviously mine, I suppose, too risky to steal outright. That one would need a different strategy, a better story. I didn't move. I didn't change my breathing. I let her believe I was as helpless as I appeared. The performance was becoming easier, or perhaps I was becoming numb to it. Monday brought a different kind of theft. I'd always loved chicken soup. My mother made it when I was sick as a girl, sitting beside my bed, her gentle hands cooling my forehead. I made it for David when he had the flu at age 7, watching him recover, feeling that fierce maternal pride at having healed him. It was comfort in a bowl, security, love. Catherine knew this, or maybe she didn't. Maybe it didn't matter either way. She brought me lunch on a tray, not the fresh golden broth I'd smelled her warming on the stove that morning, but something else, something lesser. Leftover rice mixed with congealed gravy from days before. A single piece of chicken that had turned gray at the edges. Vegetables I didn't recognize, probably pulled from the back of the refrigerator, their edges beginning to soften with age. "Eat," she said, setting it down without meeting my eyes. Without a single word of care. "You need your strength." I heard her in the kitchen moments later, speaking to David. Why waste the good soup? She eats what we give her anyway. This way we save money. Besides, she's not going to be here long enough to matter. I ate every bite of that cold, unappetizing slop, and with each spoonful, something crystallized inside me. This wasn't just about money or inconvenience. This was about contempt. This was about how quickly I had become something disposable in my own home, something to be managed, minimized, discarded. They weren't just stealing my possessions. They were stealing my dignity, piece by piece, meal by meal. They were testing how much they could take from me before I stopped being their mother and became just another burden. I set the empty bowl aside and closed my eyes. 3 more days until Friday. 3 more days until the taxi came. 3 more days until I showed them exactly who Eleanor Mitchell really was. Wednesday morning came, and I stopped pretending to sleep. I lay there in that corner room, ears sharp as a hawk's waiting, listening. My entire body had become a sensor attuned to every sound, every shift in tone, every hesitation in speech. Catherine had grown careless, or perhaps she'd never truly believed I was listening to begin with. That paralysis of the legs meant paralysis of the mind. She was wrong. Around mid-morning, Catherine's voice carried through the house like a trumpet, announcing its intentions, loud, animated, unguarded. She was on the phone and David's study door cracked just enough that her words found their way to me like poison seeping through walls. I recognized the voice on the other end. Meredith, Catherine's sister. Meredith, I'm telling you, we're looking at facilities now, the cheapest ones. There are a few that take Medicare, so the costs would be manageable. Her voice had taken on that particular tone. I'd begun to recognize the tone of someone calculating, solving a problem, moving pieces on a chessboard. A pause, a laugh that made my skin crawl. She'll adjust fine. People her age always do. They get used to it quickly. Once she's in there, she won't even remember what her own house looked like. Hell, she might even be happier. Less to worry about, I felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart that was still beating steadily. It was something else. A final thread connecting me to the illusion that my son loved me more than he feared his wife. But Wednesday wasn't the end of the story. Thursday brought the full architecture of their plan into terrible focus. I heard David come home early that afternoon, unusual for him. His footsteps crossed the hallway with purpose, and I caught fragments of their conversation before it moved to the kitchen before they thought they were safely out of earshot. I pressed myself against the mattress, every muscle tense, every nerve focused like a laser. Once she's in there, Catherine said, her voice low but not low enough. This house is ours. We can finally sell it. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. My stomach turned to ice. I forced myself to keep breathing normally, to keep my chest rising and falling as if I were truly asleep, truly helpless, truly unaware. Eleanor paid good money for this place, sure. Catherine continued, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. But legally, we can figure something out. Power of attorney, medical conservatorship. My brother's a lawyer. He owes me a favor. David's response came so quietly I almost missed it. I don't know Kate. You don't know... Catherine's voice sharpened into something I'd never heard before. Not quite anger, but something colder. Professional. David. We've been drowning in debt for 5 years. This house is worth over $1 million. Your mother doesn't have anyone else. No one who cares enough to fight for her interests. The cruelty of that statement. The absolute certainty of it. Another pause stretched between them. Long, heavy, full of consequence. Okay, David finally said. His voice was barely a whisper. Okay, do what you need to do. Those words. 6 small words that confirmed what I'd suspected all along. I lay still, understanding now the full scope of their betrayal. They didn't just want to discard me. They wanted to steal everything I'd built, everything I'd earned through relentless work and sacrifice. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow at 7 a.m., the taxi would arrive at my curb. Tomorrow, everything changed. If you're still here with me, comment 11 below so I know you're still watching. And tell me this, if you were in her place and you realized your own family was quietly planning to erase you, would you stay silent or would you leave on your own terms? Please note the next part of this story includes some fictionalized elements used for storytelling purposes and may not reflect real events in every detail. If this isn't something you wish to continue with, you're free to stop watching here. I never slept that night. Not because I couldn't. My body was trained by decades of nursing to rest when rest was possible to gather strength for what came next. But my mind wouldn't allow it. Every nerve ending in my body was a live electric humming with anticipation. I lay in that corner bed as the hours dissolved, midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and I simply waited. Watched the darkness shift. Listened to the house breathe around me. At some point, I stopped pretending. My eyes opened in the pre-dawn gray. The corner room was still dim, still cold, still shaped like a prison. But I wasn't the same woman who'd lain here 4 days ago. that Eleanor, frightened, uncertain, testing the waters, had transformed into someone else entirely. Someone who'd seen the full architecture of her son's betrayal and decided not to crumble beneath it. Instead, I decided to stand. 6:47 a.m. I heard the first sounds of the house waking. Footsteps, the coffee maker. Catherine's voice, bright and false, talking to David about the facility, as if she were discussing the weather, as if she hadn't orchestrated the theft of my home, my dignity, my entire future. At exactly 7 o'clock in the morning, they came. David pushed open the door to the living room first. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, the kind that come from sleeping poorly, from nights spent wrestling with conscience, before ultimately choosing convenience. Catherine followed behind him, already dressed in her designer workout clothes, already prepared for her day, already certain of her victory. "Mom," David said, and his voice cracked slightly. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "We need to talk about today." Catherine didn't wait for him to finish. "We've arranged everything," she said, her tone brisk, businesslike, the way you'd discuss moving furniture. "A very nice facility, clean, affordable. You'll be comfortable there." Comfortable. As if comfort was what I'd asked for. As if comfort was what any of this was about. I kept my eyes closed. Kept my breathing shallow and even. Let them believe for just a few more moments that I was still the woman they'd planned to dispose of. That was when I heard it. A car door closing. Outside, on the street, the sound of an engine idling, steady, patient, reliable. Right on schedule. 7 a.m. exactly. The driver was here, waiting at the curb with the meter running exactly as I'd arranged 5 nights ago in the darkness. Catherine and David didn't hear it. They were too focused on their script, too absorbed in the narrative they'd constructed, where I was the problem and they were the solution. But I heard it. I heard the taxi waiting for me. I heard my escape. I heard the sound of my own freedom purring softly on the street outside the home they thought they were about to steal. In that moment, lying there in the darkness with Catherine's voice washing over me like cheap perfume, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not fear, not anger. Something far colder and more powerful than either of those. Clarity. Perfect crystalline clarity. They had no idea what was about to happen. They had no concept of the woman they'd underestimated. They'd looked at a 72-year-old nurse in a hospital gown and seen a problem to be solved. They hadn't seen a warrior. They hadn't seen someone who'd fought for 40 years to save lives, to build a home, to create something of value in this world. Someone who'd learned long ago that survival sometimes meant doing the unexpected. Someone who'd already won. I took a breath, a deep one. The kind of breath you take before you dive. Then I opened my eyes, and everything changed. I opened my eyes and made a choice. Not the choice they expected. A different kind of choice entirely, the kind that comes after you've watched the people you love most reveal exactly who they are beneath the mask of family obligation. I pushed myself up slowly. My left leg, the one they thought was paralyzed, responded. It wasn't magic. I had spent every midnight of the past 7 days moving it inch by inch under the covers, fighting the nerve pain in secret. Now the muscles engaged, fueled by a decade of stamina from 12-hour shifts. I was a nurse. I knew how to push through pain when the goal was survival. The mattress shifted beneath my weight as I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. David's eyes went wide. Catherine's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, a fish, gasping for air. "Mom," David's voice cracked. "What are you—" I ignored him and stood up. I steadied myself, placed one hand on the nightstand, and then I let go. I stood on my own 2 feet. The white dress I'd chosen hung perfectly. I'd selected it carefully 3 days ago, knowing this moment would come. It was the dress I'd worn to a gala at Providence Hospital 20 years ago when they'd honored me for my years of service. Elegant, dignified, unbroken. Catherine made a sound something between shock and terror. I took my first step toward them. My leg didn't falter. My spine didn't bend. I moved across that corner room like I was walking out of a tomb, because that's what it had been. A grave they dug for me with their casual cruelty and calculated betrayals. "I'm not paralyzed," I said quietly. My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever heard it. I was never paralyzed. David's face went pale. "Mom, I don't understand." "No," I said. "You don't. That's the problem." I stepped closer until I was standing directly in front of them both. Catherine had backed up against the wall as if my proximity was something dangerous. She was right. It was. I heard everything. I said, my eyes moving from David to Catherine and back again. Every word, every plan, every casual dismissal of my life, my home, my dignity. I've been listening to you both for 7 days while you thought I was helpless. Catherine's hands trembled. "Eleanor, we can explain." "No," I said sharply, "you can't, and I don't want to hear it." I turned to face my son directly. "David, you had a choice. At every single moment over the past week, you could have stood up. You could have protected your mother instead of your wife's bank account. Instead, you chose greed. You chose silence. You chose wrong." His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't soften. "And you," I said, turning to Catherine, "you didn't just steal from me. You didn't just plan to throw me away in the cheapest facility you could find. You conspired to take my home, the place I built with my own hands that I earned through relentless work and sacrifice. You looked at a 72-year-old woman and decided she was an inconvenience worth erasing." Catherine started, her voice shaking. "You're no longer part of this family," I said, and the words fell like stones between us. "You forfeited that right the moment you reached for my mother's necklace. You lost it completely when you decided my home was yours to steal." I looked back at David. "And you, my son. You lost it when you said those 2 words, 'Okay, Kate.' 2 words. That's all it took to betray everything I taught you about honor, about loyalty, about what family means. I don't need you," I said to both of them. "But you're going to need me, and I will never help you again. Not when you're struggling, not when you're desperate, not when you finally understand what you've lost." I walked toward the window. "There's a taxi waiting for me outside," I said, not even turning back. "I arranged it 7 days ago. I've known every step of your plan since before Catherine stole my jewelry. I've documented every lie, every theft, every moment of your betrayal." Behind me, I heard Catherine gasp. "I've also spoken with an attorney." I continued, my voice steady and clinical. "Every document you've tried to hide the theft, the conversations about the facility, the conspiracy to take this house, it's all been cataloged and placed in her hands. She has instructions. If you choose to contest what's coming, those documents become part of legal proceedings. If you choose to accept it quietly, you'll have the chance to begin again. But understand this clearly, the choices you make in the next 30 days will determine your future." There was silence. Not the silence of acceptance, but the silence of people who've suddenly realized they've lost control of the narrative. "Goodbye, David. Goodbye, Catherine." And then I stepped into the hallway, leaving them standing in stunned silence. Behind me, I heard Catherine begin to cry, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The taxi was waiting. I walked to the kitchen table with steady hands. In my pocket was a white envelope. I'd written what I needed to write during one of the nights when I lay awake listening to the Willamette River. The words were simple, carefully chosen. I opened my purse and removed the cash, $247.83. 7 days of meals they'd decided I wasn't worth feeding properly. 7 days of cruelty measured in dollars and cents. I counted the bills slowly, deliberately. This wasn't about the money. This was about language speaking in the only currency they understood: greed. I placed the cash inside the envelope, then unfolded my handwritten note. I'd spent hours choosing every word, knowing this would be the first official communication, the first piece of documentation, the first legal step. Payment for your care over the past 7 days. Thank you for showing me exactly who you truly are beneath the masks you wear. I have placed all documentation of your actions, the theft, the conversations, the conspiracy to take my home in the hands of my attorney. For every day you remain in this house after this letter, those documents become part of legal proceedings. You have 30 days to leave with dignity or face the consequences in court. My attorney's contact information is enclosed. The choice is yours, but I am no longer silent. Eleanor Mitchell, attorney Margaret Davis, Davis and Associates Law, 503-555-0147. I sealed the envelope and placed it on the kitchen table center where they couldn't miss it. Inside the envelope, along with the $247.83 in cash, was a card with the lawyer's contact information and a single line handwritten beneath. Margaret Davis and Associates Law, 503-555-0147. She has everything you need to know. You have 30 days. The formal eviction notice itself would arrive by certified mail within 48 hours, prepared and ready by my attorney, the moment she understood the full scope of their conspiracy. This envelope was just the prelude, the warning, the moment when everything they'd taken for granted would begin to crumble. Mom, wait. David had followed me. His face was pale. Behind him, Catherine stood frozen. I'm leaving David, I said simply. Mom, please, we can talk about this. No, we can't. I opened the front door. The morning air of Portland hit my face cool and clean. Outside at the curb exactly where I'd arranged was the taxi. 7:00 a.m. exactly. Right on schedule. He'd kept his word. Unlike some people, David's voice cracked behind me. I love you, Mom, please. I paused on the threshold, not because I believed him, but because I wanted to feel the full weight of that lie one last time. Love isn't something you perform when it's convenient, I said quietly. Love requires choice, and you chose wrong. I stepped outside and closed the door. The taxi driver opened the back door without questions. Ready to go, ma'am? Yes, I said. Let's go. As we pulled away, I turned to look back one final time. In my small bag was a folder, copies of the documentation my attorney would formally file within days, photos of the stolen jewelry that Catherine hadn't yet pawned, audio recordings of their conversations about the facility and the house captured on my phone's voice memo app while I lay silent in that corner bed, medical records confirming my nervous system was healing, not permanently paralyzed. Proof of every calculated cruelty. They didn't know the depth of what I'd prepared. They didn't understand that I'd spent 5 nights gathering evidence, photographing items, recording conversations, while pretending to sleep. A nurse's attention to detail, a strategist's patience. 40 years of learning how to observe people had taught me everything I needed to know about documentation. The white Victorian with the wraparound porch sat on the street where I'd left it, beautiful, stately, paid for by my own hands. I looked at it one last time as the taxi turned the corner, and I felt something release inside my chest. Not sadness, not regret, just the simple acknowledgement that I was leaving behind a life that was never truly mine to begin with. Behind that house in the kitchen, David was reaching for the envelope. Catherine's hands were trembling as she read the lawyer's name. I could imagine their faces. The moment they understood that this wasn't just about me leaving, this was about consequences, real, legal, unavoidable consequences. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked. Oceanside Retreat, I said. Just outside the city, by the coast. Beautiful place, he said. You'll love it there. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The irony was exquisite. I'd paid them for abandoning me, but the real message the letter beneath said I'd been watching, I'd been documenting, and I was done being silent. They thought they'd won. They thought they could discard Eleanor Mitchell like she was nothing, like 40 years of sacrifice meant nothing, like a home built brick by brick could be stolen without consequence. They had no idea that everything had just changed. The taxi carried me toward the ocean, toward the sound of waves, toward a life that was finally completely my own. I was 72 years old, and for the first time in a very long time, I was finally free. 3 weeks later, I sat on the porch of a small cottage overlooking the Willamette River and drank my coffee black. The morning was cool and quiet. A few birds called out to each other across the water. I'd rented this place sight unseen the day I left Portland, guided only by the name and the promise of peace. What I found was something better than peace. I found possibility. I found myself. The cottage was simple, but dignified. A small desk by the window where I could watch the river flow endlessly toward freedom. A kitchen where I could cook for myself again, choosing what to eat, when to eat, with no one to judge or criticize. A bedroom where I could sleep without fear. These simple spaces represented something enormous. They were mine earned through my own choices, protected by my own boundaries. My phone sat on the small table beside me. I picked it up and called Dr. Young at Providence Hospital. "Dr. Young, it's Eleanor Mitchell," I said when she answered. "I'm calling to ask if you have any volunteer opportunities. I'd like to work with women in labor again." There was a pause. Then, "Eleanor, I thought you'd retired." "I haven't retired," I said, watching the river flow past. "I'm just beginning to live." 2 weeks later, I was back at Providence Hospital 3 days a week. My hands, which had caught countless babies over decades of dedication and exhaustion, remembered their purpose. The young nurses welcomed me like I'd never left. The expectant mothers found comfort in my presence, something authentic they couldn't quite name, but recognized as truth. I was doing what I'd always done best, helping new life find its way into the world. The work was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Delivering a baby at 72 felt the same as it did at 32, sacred, powerful, meaningful. Each new life was a reminder that the world wasn't defined by the people who'd tried to discard me. One afternoon, I sat at the desk in my cottage and wrote a letter I never intended to send. "David, I'm not angry with you. I'm deeply disappointed. Forgiveness isn't the same as trust. I can forgive you for choosing your wife over your mother. I can forgive you for your silence. I can forgive you for not having the courage to stand up when it mattered most. But earning back my trust will take time. That will require different choices, better choices. You still have that opportunity. You're still young enough to change. You're still capable of becoming the man I raised you to be before Catherine reshaped you into someone smaller, someone afraid. God sees what you've done, but He also sees what you could become. The choice is yours. Your mother, Eleanor." I sealed it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Some letters are meant to be written, but never sent. This letter was for me proof that I could forgive, without forgetting could love, without enabling could release resentment, without excusing betrayal. I thought about what I'd done. The taxi arranged 7 days in advance, the documentation carefully compiled, the lawyer contacted, the 30-day notice left on the kitchen table. Had it been fair? Possibly not. But fairness wasn't the point. Survival was. I'd spent my entire life caring for others, delivering babies, comforting patients, raising my son alone. I'd poured myself into everyone around me. And when I was vulnerable, when I needed protection, they'd tried to erase me. They'd tried to steal not just my home, but my dignity, my legacy, my right to exist. So I'd protected myself. I'd been strategic. I'd been meticulous. I'd been free. That evening, as the sun turned, the river gold, and the first stars began to appear, I walked along the beach near my cottage. The sand was cool beneath my feet. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, vast, powerful, indifferent to human suffering. I thought about everything that had led me here. The fall, the hospital, the corner room, Catherine's sigh, David's silence, the jewelry disappearing, the meals degrading, the conversations about facilities and houses and money, and then the decision, 7 days of watching, 7 days of documenting, 7 days of proving that Eleanor Mitchell was far more than the woman they thought they could discard. A woman jogging past nodded at me. I nodded back. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know what I'd done or why. She just saw an older woman standing on the beach watching the sunset. That was enough. I'd spent 72 years living for other people. I'd spent 7 days reclaiming myself. And now I had the rest of my life to figure out who I wanted to be when I was finally free to choose. The ocean waves crashed against the shore, relentless and eternal. The stars multiplied as the sky darkened. The wind picked up, carrying salt and freedom. I turned and walked back toward my small cottage, toward my desk, toward my books, toward my life. Behind me, the waves continued their ancient rhythm, indifferent and free. Just like Eleanor Mitchell. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and I need to be honest with you about something. This family drama stories is mine, but it's also a warning for anyone watching family drama stories unfold around them. Don't wait until you're 72 years old to discover who your family really is. Don't spend decades sacrificing only to find out that sacrifice was taken for granted. Family drama stories are happening everywhere, and grandma stories like mine show us a painful truth. Don't let people convince you that your life is theirs to manage, control, or discard. I learned these lessons the hard way, and I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone. Here's what I've learned from living through Grandma's stories that matter. Family is not a guarantee of love. It's not automatically earned by blood. Love is earned through choice, through respect, through the courage to stand up and say no when someone treats you as disposable. God teaches us about forgiveness, but He also teaches us about self-worth. God doesn't want us to be doormats, and neither should you. He sees us. He honors us. God is watching, and He knows the truth of your heart. I've spent 40 years bringing new lives into this world, and I've learned that the most beautiful thing we can do is protect ourselves with the same ferocity we protect those we love. That's not selfish. That's survival. If you're listening to Grandma stories and recognizing yourself in family drama stories like mine, if you're being pushed aside, I need you to understand you matter. Your life belongs to you. Your dignity is not negotiable. Family drama stories prove that it's never too late to reclaim your power. Grandma stories like mine show hope is always possible. Please subscribe, and share this family drama stories content. If you know someone living this, they need to hear it. Note: this narrative contains dramatized elements for educational purposes. While some details are fictional, the lessons and messages are entirely valuable. If this storytelling style doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. Please feel free to seek content that better suits your needs.